If you want to strengthen the right muscles in the right positions to improve scapular winging, this is the video for you. Now, I'm going to assume that you already have achieved what I talk about in many of my other videos, which is adequate expansion of the rib cage. I have many videos on that, but just to summarize quickly, if this shoulder is rounded forward and pulled forward, that means it's likely coming off of that rib cage. So what we want to do first is expand this chest wall right here to allow for that shoulder to roll back upon normal inhalation. The serratus anterior, mid and low traps and the rhomboids to a certain extent are going to be responsible for holding this scapula on the rib cage as we get into progressively higher levels of shoulder elevation or scapular upward rotation. If these muscles are weak and they are unable to hold the scapula on the rib cage, then this rib cage is much more likely to stay in a winged and turned out position or an internally rotated position of the scapula, which is partially scapular winging. The serratus anterior is tremendously helpful for protraction of that shoulder, but also controlling that scapula as it goes into elevation and also upward rotation. So the serratus is one of these muscles that if you've already been going after certain degrees of rib cage expansion, you're probably already getting some recruitment of it through whatever reaches you were doing, which is great. So we're off to a good start. But we can also train it through exercises that are more loaded in nature so that we can get that active control and loaded control of this upward rotation as we go into higher degrees of that elevation. Here are a couple of drills I really like for that.
So what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we are going to get a nice stack to begin with. So what I like to do is cue a reach of both arms. As you do that, you shouldn't lose any height in your skeleton, and you should be able to feel your sit bones on that bench there, or whatever you're using to sit on. Knees and hips are bent at 90 degrees. This cable is starting at shoulder height. Now, here's the most important thing. Keep that reach, keep your head neutral, and then bring your grip on this cable right here to about a 45-ish degree angle. Now what I want you to do, and you can see it here, is as you pull that arm back, think about keeping it just below shoulder level. This is going to line up the line of pull with the fibers of the muscles of the upper back we want to recruit here. I like to keep the other arm reaching here because that's going to keep my rib cage in a good position to allow for the shoulder blade to glide on it. I'm going to inhale as I pull back. Because that shoulder blade is being pulled back and down, that's going to expand my chest on the same side with air, which is what we want. Because normally when we're breathing, we want that to expand as the shoulder comes back. So I'm going to reach here. I'm going to inhale, pull, exhale.
Key, what I'll have you do is get on your toes in the back, and then your whole foot's flat in the front. And then the weight is mostly on the front leg. I'd say probably 80% is on that front leg. Now, what we need to do to start off this position, the natural human spine curve has a slight degree of flexion at the upper back and a little bit of extension at the bottom. So we want to make sure that we're really pushing these ribs back like so, but we're not losing height. What a lot of people will do is they'll overly slouch like this. You should be able to reach those ribs back and not lose any height in your skeleton. That's how you know you're doing it right. So what I cue first is a double arm reach, just like this at the top. Ribs are back, press into my hand. Nice. Okay, now bring that landmine back, and then exhale and switch those arms, getting a nice active reach of this arm at the top. Now this arm is reaching, and switch. Keeping these ribs back, making sure that there's a slight, very tiny degree of flexion within this upper back. That's going to allow the scapula to glide with the rib cage. That's exactly what we're trying to have happen here. Another muscle we want to go after, in addition to the mid and low traps here, is the long head of the triceps, which attaches on this outer edge of the scapula. So if this muscle contracts together, it actually assists in downward rotation of that scap. And that's really helpful for just in a static posture where we're just standing. If this shoulder is winged forward, it's also probably upwardly rotated to a certain extent. So what we would want to do is facilitate that triceps, and you can usually do that alongside the low trap to help bring that scap down, and that's going to allow for that shoulder to be pulled back to a certain extent.
To set up in this position, you want to make sure that you have a bench that allows you to get long in your back with it. You should have this knee underneath the back hip, and this leg is just stabilizing on the ground. So what you should be able to do is get this arm directly underneath the shoulder, and then get long in the back, but then slightly push the bench away, keeping your elbow very slightly unlocked right here. Now, keep your head neutral. And what I want you to do is exhale as you pull and extend that arm slightly behind you. Pause here as you inhale, and then return back. What you should be able to do is get a little bit of a forward reach with this elbow, which is going to stretch out the long head of the triceps so you can recruit it even more. So make sure that elbow goes a little bit forward, and then just exhale back. Extend that arm, and then inhale through your nose at the top. And as you bring it back, finish off that inhale through your nose. You might feel some expansion in your chest, and that's good.
Finally, what I would want to do is make sure that we can get the scapula to be held on the rib cage as we get into higher levels of elevation. This would be one of the last steps. We can do that in a position that's going to help facilitate upward rotation of the scap and using the low trap to still keep that scapula on the rib cage. And here's a really good drill for that.
To start, you need a light band that allows you to get your arm overhead, but also isn't so strong to where you have to struggle to really hold it there. So I have a yellow one here, and then what you want to do is slightly stagger your stance as this back foot steps on the band right here. And then you want to have maybe 75% of your weight on this back heel here, but both of your feet are flat. And then slightly tuck your hips, reach down to the floor with the same side arm of the leg that is back, and then I want you to imagine that you are drawing a sword out of a sheath, but the band is the sword. So start here, stay heavy on that heel, exhale up, slight bend in the elbow, and now your hand and arm should be in line with your trunk, and you're still slightly side bent to this side right here. Exhale fully until you feel these side abs engage, and then hold that compression here as you inhale through your nose.
Now remember, just because we're strengthening muscles doesn't mean the breathing is not important, because we want to treat these exercises as more sensory in nature. We don't want to overload these in a 1 rep max. These are designed to help give us the ability to optimize the relationship between scapula, rib cage, and the arm.